Alright, Shalom, Yasha Allah.
Shalom.
Back with another GMS on the go. This is the Raleigh, North Carolina camp. I'm Brother Nakam.
Brother Shawai.
And before we go any further, we'd like to give all honor, all glory, and all praises to the Heavenly Father and His only begotten Son, Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahweh Shai, by Hashem, Rakar Kwadash. Next up, double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone from teaching us this truth according to the Bible and who rule well. And a double shalom to all the sincere Akim throughout the four corners of the earth, pushing this truth in righteousness and sincerity to the best of your ability. And me and the brother was able to get up today, and we just gonna go into a lesson on how you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and the Americans, who are the real biblical Hebrew Israelites, are not supposed to be learning the ways of these heathens. I'm gonna say that again. You so-called Negroes, Latinos, and the Americans, who are the real biblical Hebrew Israelites, you're not supposed to be learning the ways of these heathens. So without further ado, we're gonna dive right into it.
This is Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 1. Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel.
Right, Israel, you so-called Negroes, Latino, and the Americans, again, who are the real biblical Hebrew Israelites. Hear this word. You see this King James Bible, this 1611. You see that's meant for you. Read it from the top again.
This is Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 1. Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen.
Right, so you so-called Negroes, Latino, and the Americans, you're not supposed to be learning the ways of the heathens. And who are the heathens? Esau, the so-called white man. Moab and Ammon, the so-called Chinese and Japanese. Elam, the so-called Dahese Indians. Ishmael, the so-called musty Arabs. You see Ham, the so-called Duty Africans. And so forth on. Anybody else I left out. You see, so you so-called Negroes, Latino, and the Americans, you're not supposed to be learning the ways of these heathens. You see, you're not supposed to be following after their ways. You see, you're not supposed to be doing what they're doing. And what's some of the things that these heathens do that you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans are not supposed to be doing? Defiling your temple by smoking weed, cigarettes, black and miles, and so forth on. Eating all these abominable foods such as shrimp, pork, crab, lobster.
Sleeping with the next man's wife.
Vice versa, which is?
Adultery.
Kind. You see, you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're not supposed to be celebrating all these pagan holidays such as
Christmas,
Thanksgiving, Easter, kind.
Easter just passed, and St. Patrick's Day,
Mother's Day,
Valentine's Day, Groundhog Day,
Father's Day,
Mother's Day,
kind. 4th of July. You see, you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're not supposed to be worshiping all these false gods who are no gods, such as Allah,
Buddha,
the Hindu god of Shiva,
Caesarea,
kind.
Serapis,
Kind. There you go. That's right.
The reincarnation.
Baphomet. You see, and so forth on. You see, you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're not supposed to be indulging in sodomy, man with man, woman with woman. You see, everything that me and the brother Naaman read about now are the things what these heathen nations do. You see, you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're not supposed to be following after their ways. So read that from the top again.
This is Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 1. Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven.
Right, and you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're not supposed to be dismayed at the signs of heaven. And what's the signs of heaven? You know, the stars, the moon.
Solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, stuff.
Kind. The blood moon.
Yeah, the blood moon, yeah.
You see, and so forth on. So you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're not supposed to be dismayed at the signs of heaven. Meaning what? You're not supposed to worship that stuff. You see, you let the heathens be dismayed at the signs of heaven. You let them worship that stuff because that's what they do. But you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're supposed to worship the entity who created the signs of heaven. You see, you're supposed to worship Yahweh Shai. Read on.
For the heathens are dismayed at them.
Right, the heathens, again, they're dismayed at the signs of heaven. They worship that stuff. But you so-called Negroes, Latino Americans, you're not supposed to worship that stuff. You're supposed to worship the entity who created the signs of heaven.
Yeah, precept.
Kind.
This is Deuteronomy Unless you want me to get your Deuteronomy first.
Finish that out real quick.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Verse 3?
Yeah.
All right. This is Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 3. For the customs of the people are vain.
Right, that's it. So the customs of the people are vain. You see, so following the ways of these heathen nations, doing what they're doing, it's not going to profit you anything. You see, so you so-called Negroes, Latino Americans, you don't need to be learning the ways of the heathen nations. You don't need to be, following after their doings. You see, why? Because you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you are a holy people. You see, and that word holy means what? Separate.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead and bring that out.
Mm-hmm.
Either one.
Okay. This is Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 9.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord shall establish thee an holy people unto himself.
So the Lord is going to establish you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans a holy people unto himself. And again, you look at that word holy, it means what? Mm-hmm. Separate. Yep. So the Lord made you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans a separate people unto himself. A separate people from who? These other nations.
Yep. As he have sworn unto thee, if thou shalt keep the commandments of the Lord thy power and walk in his ways.
Right. If you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans keep the commandments and walk in his ways. Mm-hmm. And that's self-explanatory. Yeah, so you so-called Negroes, Latino Americans, you're supposed to be keeping the laws, statutes, commandments of the Bible. You see, because the laws, statutes, commandments of the Bible was meant for you. According to Leviticus 26 and 46, Psalms 147 and 19, and many other scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
Deuteronomy 7:6.
Oh, yeah, 7:6. Mm-hmm. This is Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6.
Mm-hmm.
For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy power.
So again, you so-called Negroes, Latino Americans, y'all are a holy people. And again, that word holy means separate. You see, so you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're supposed to be a separate people unto Yahweh Shai, who the world ignorantly calls God and Jesus, who's so-called black man. Meaning what? You're supposed to be separate from Esau, the so-called white man. You're supposed to be separate from Moab and Ammon, the so-called Chinese and Japanese. You're supposed to be separate from Ishmael, the so-called musty Arabs. You're supposed to be separate from Elon, the so-called Dahese Indians. You're supposed to be separate from Ham, the so-called Dude Africans, and anybody else I left out. You see, so if you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans are separate people unto the Lord, then you shouldn't be wanting to learn the ways of the heathen nation and do what they do.
Mm-hmm. From the top, this is Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6. Mm-hmm. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy power. The Lord thy power have chosen thee to be a special people unto himself.
Isaiah 44:1. Right, so the Lord has chosen you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and the Americans to be a special people unto himself. And real quick, you're going to prove that the Lord has chosen you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and the Americans. Because somebody might be like, well, that didn't say Israel. So we're going to prove that Israel is the chosen people.
Mm-hmm. This is Isaiah chapter 44, verse 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yet now hear, O Jacob, my servant, and Israel, whom I have chosen.
Right, and that's the point. It said Israel, whom I have chosen. So you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you are Yahweh Shai's chosen. You so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans. So again, go back.
Mm-hmm.
That it on Isaiah?
Yep.
Kind.
This is Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy power. The Lord thy power have chosen thee to be a special people unto himself.
Right, so the Lord has chosen you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans to be a special people unto himself. And when you look at that word special, we're going to get the definition real quick and read it.
Okay, the definition of special, it's an adjective, something to describe something. Better.
Right, so the Lord said that you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans are better people than all these other nations that are upon the face of the earth. You see, you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're better than these other nations at everything you do. You see, you're better than these other nations at dancing, sports, dressing, cooking,
anything,
and looks.
Yep.
You see, you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're better than these other nations at everything that you do. So the Lord, read another one, Salaki.
Right, greater.
Right, you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're a greater people than all the other nations that are upon the face of the earth.
Yep. Or otherwise different from what is usual.
Right, and you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're definitely different from these other nations. You see, and these are just some of the definitions that goes back to the word special. You see, so you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you were chosen to be that special people unto Yahweh, Yahweh Shai. So go ahead and go back to Deuteronomy.
Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6. For thou art a holy people unto the Lord thy power. The Lord thy power hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth.
Under all people that are upon the face of the earth.
Above all people that are upon the face of the earth.
Equal to all people upon the face of the earth.
Above all people that are upon the face of the earth.
Right, so the Lord has chosen you, so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, to be above all people. You see, all the other nations that are upon the face of the earth. You see, because you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're better than all the other nations upon the face of the earth. So go ahead and give me Deuteronomy 14 then on 2.
Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 2. For thou art a holy people, the Lord thy power, unto the Lord thy power.
Read that from the top again.
This is Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 2. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy power.
Right, so again, this is backing up Deuteronomy 76. That word holy means separate. So you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're a separate people to the Lord. So you're supposed to be separate from all the other nations upon the face of the earth. You see, so if you're a separate people unto the Lord, you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you shouldn't be trying to learn the ways of the heathen. You shouldn't be trying to learn the ways of the heathen nations. You see, you shouldn't be trying to do what they do. Because you so-called Negroes, Latino Americans, you are a separate people unto the Lord. Read on.
And the Lord have chosen thee to be a peculiar people unto himself.
Right, and we already proved that that the Lord chosen you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans. You see, so the Lord has chosen you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans to be what? A peculiar people unto himself. And now we're gonna look at the word peculiar.
The word peculiar, another adjective to describe something. Strange or odd, unusual.
Keep going.
No, or unusual.
Right, so the Lord said that you so-called Negroes, Latino Americans are a strange people. You see, and these heathen nations, they do look at you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans as a strange people. You see, because they can't figure out how we move the way we move, and how we do the things that we do. And it's ultimately because the spirit and power of Yahweh shines in us. You see, you want to say something?
Yeah, you can go ahead and finish up.
Yeah, you.
Yeah, like the brother is saying, even in our current state right now, we're as low as we've ever been. But listen, if you, people that grew up watching Jordan, listen to how the commentators sound when Jordan take off from the free throw line. You know what I'm saying? Certain stuff like that. When even certain stuff that they do every day. When Tiger Woods hit a hole in one from the farthest distance that's ever been hit. You know what I'm saying? At every sport or everything there is, the best of that sport or cooking or any type of thing that has to show talent at the very top, if they're not number one, they're at least number two. It's an Israelite.
That's right.
That's best at anything that there is. And if he doesn't look like an Israelite, 9 times out of 10, his line goes back to being an Israelite.
That's right. And just laying back off the brother, everything that, Jake do, we exceed at it. You see? And we see that everything's so good that it's strange to these other nations that how we do the things that we do, really. You see? So for instance, like the brother was saying, like, you look at sports, you see Michael Jordan, you see LeBron James, Kevin Durant, you see James Harden, you see Stephen Curry and so forth on. You see them dunking from the free throw line, doing alley hoops, windmills, 360s. You see going behind their back with the ball, going under the leg with their ball and all that stuff, and that's strange to these heathen nations. You see, they see Emmitt Smith, Barry Sanders, Walter Payton, Terrell Owen, Chad Johnson and so forth on, catching passes with one hand, diving into the end zone, doing all these juke moves and spin moves and stiff arms, and that's strange to them because we doing things that they can never do. You see, they see how we made it through 400 years of slavery, and that's strange to them. You see, so you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, y'all are that strange, that odd. You see, what's the other definition?
Unusual.
And the unusual people. You see, and these are just some of the definitions that go back to what? Peculiar. So read that from the top again. Going back to the
This is Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 2. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy power.
That's right.
And the Lord have chosen thee to be a peculiar people unto himself.
Right, so the Lord has chosen you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans to be that peculiar and that special people unto himself. So if you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans are that peculiar and special people unto the Lord, you see, then you shouldn't be trying to learn the ways of the heathen nations. You shouldn't be trying to do what these heathen nations doing. You see, you shouldn't be trying to follow their ways. You see, because you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're a separate people unto the Lord, and you got your own way to follow, which is what? The law, statute, commandments of the Bible, which was given to you. Again, going back to Leviticus 26 and 46, and Psalms 147 and 19, and many other scriptures.
And the Lord have chosen thee to be a peculiar people unto himself, above all the nations that are upon the earth.
Under all nations upon the face of the earth.
Above all of the nations.
Equal to all people upon the face of the earth.
Above all the nations.
Right, so you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you were chosen to be above all the nations that are upon the face of the earth. You see? So you don't need to be doing what these heathen nations are doing. You see, if anything, they should be envying and following after your ways. You see, because you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you set the trend and everything. You see? So you so-called Negro, Latino Americans don't learn the ways of the heathen nations. Don't do what they do. Got anything?
No, man. Just like the brother was saying, man, you like he's saying, these heathens should be coming, and which they do in a roundabout way. They do try to follow everything that we do, but that's how it should be. It shouldn't be the other way around, because you got 2/3 of our people trying to be like the heathens, you know, and dyeing their hair, getting context, blue eyes, blonde hair, and stuff like that. And you the greatest people of the earth, and the scriptures say not to envy thy oppressor. So the Lord has chosen you Israelites to be at the top of the food chain, not the other way around.
That's right.
And that's it.
So with that, I hope you've been edified. It's been another GMS on the go. This is the Raleigh, North Carolina camp. Before we go any further, we like to give all honor, all glory, and all praises to the Heavenly Father and His only begotten Son, Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushua, Ba'ashem, Rakar Kodash. Next up, double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone from teaching us this truth according to the Bible and who rule well, and a double shalom to all the sincere Akim throughout the four corners of the earth, pushing this truth and righteousness and sincerity to the best of your ability. Until next time, shalom.
Shalom.